September 1862, an abandoned meadow in Maryland. A Union soldier spots something strange on the ground, a small bundle of 3 cigars, wrapped tightly in a piece of paper. That paper is Special Order 191, the highly classified invasion plans drafted by Confederate General Robert E. Lee. How exactly does a misplaced piece of paper trigger the bloodiest day in American military history? And how does the resulting battle, ending in a frustrating stalemate, manage to rewrite the core purpose of the war? In this moment, the future of international diplomacy and the lives of millions of enslaved people came to rest on a stray bundle of cigars. By this point, the conflict has been grinding on for a year and a half. The Confederate Army, riding a wave of victories, decides to cross out of Virginia and invade the North. The goal is to shatter the Union's will to fight. If Lee can secure a decisive win on Northern soil, he might force a peace treaty and convince European powers, like Britain and France, to officially recognize the Confederacy. Down in Washington, President Abraham Lincoln faces his own political trap. He has drafted the Emancipation Proclamation, a document that would free enslaved people in rebel territory. But he is paralyzed by a string of recent military defeats. Releasing the document while the Union Army is losing would look like a desperate plea for help. To release it with authority, Lincoln strictly requires a battlefield win. The legal freedom of millions of enslaved people rests entirely on whatever happens next between these two armies. Thanks to that dropped cigar wrapper, Union General George McClellan knows exactly where Lee's forces are, yet McClellan hesitates, moving his troops with excruciating caution. That delay buys Lee precious time. He uses those hours to pull his scattered regiments together, forming a defensive line near the Maryland town of Sharpsburg, right along the winding banks of Antietam Creek. On the morning of September 17, 1862, the two massive armies finally collide. The fighting erupts in a 24-acre cornfield on the northern edge of the battlefield. Soldiers fire at point-blank range through the tall stalks. The acreage is so fiercely contested that it changes hands over and over again throughout the morning. The sheer volume of incoming fire instantly renders standard military maneuvers useless. Entire regiments are cut down simultaneously, with men falling dead in neat rows as if harvested by a scythe. By midday, the combat shifts south to a sunken farm road. Confederate troops use the depressed dirt path as a ready-made trench, crouching behind the wooden fences to fire. Union forces mount wave after wave of frontal assaults against this fortified position, marching directly into a concentrated, devastating crossfire. The ensuing slaughter is staggering. Over the next 3 hours, thousands of men are gunned down in this tiny stretch of land, literally filling the ditches with bodies and permanently branding the site Bloody Lane. The natural geography that provided shelter to the defenders ultimately traps them, funneling horrific amounts of lead into a narrow, inescapable trench. In the afternoon, the focal point moves again. Union troops commanded by General Ambrose Burnside are ordered to cross Antietam Creek, but they have to funnel across a narrow stone bridge. A few hundred Confederates positioned on the high bluffs on the opposite side pin down thousands of Union soldiers under heavy fire, creating a lethal bottleneck that lasts for hours. When the guns go quiet that evening, the numbers defy comprehension. Roughly 23,000 men are dead, wounded, or missing. To put this in perspective, this single-day casualty count exceeds the American losses during the D-Day landings decades later. Despite the overwhelming carnage, the battle is effectively a draw. Lee's battered army survives the bloodbath and eventually retreats back to Virginia, largely because McClellan refuses to pursue them. The most lethal 24 hours in American military history closes with a tense, exhausted standoff. Neither side definitively commands the field, but a tactical draw in Maryland translates to a massive strategic victory in Washington. By stopping the Northern invasion, the Union slams the door on Lee's ultimate objective. Without a decisive victory on Northern soil, Britain and France refuse to formally recognize the Confederacy. This Confederate retreat gives Abraham Lincoln exactly what he needs. It is close enough to a victory that he can act without appearing desperate. This document is the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. Issued just 5 days after the battle, it declares that all enslaved people in states still actively in rebellion will be legally free. The catastrophic human cost of September 17th generates the specific political capital required to push this legislation forward. Lincoln's order immediately rewrites the terms of the conflict. The war officially became a fight to dismantle the institution of slavery, rather than a struggle focused solely on borderlines and maps. The 23,000 casualties at Antietam forced the administration to define the preservation of the Union through the lens of human emancipation. The war now carries an entirely different weight. And in the next episode, that weight bears down on a small Pennsylvania town, where the survival of the United States will be tested over 3 brutal days at Gettysburg.